This is not a commercial. This is not a paid project in the industrial sense of the word. You know what I mean? This is like, this is something that's supposed to last forever.
Welcome to another episode of Cut to Reveal, the podcast where we talk about the editing art form and all the hurdles of that career path. We have today Pantelis Roumanis, who is the director of Cold Little Bird, which our Peter edited. So let's get into it. How did you guys meet and how did you guys decide to collaborate on this project together?
So Pantelis, I think you should answer that question.
I can't remember exactly what I did, but I was on YouTube and I stumbled across, I think I literally typed editors on YouTube or how to edit on YouTube. His channel came up almost, at the top. So whatever you were doing, like you were at the top of this search. And he seemed like an affable guy. And I was like, let's see what happens. Let me see if I reach out what you do. So basically, Piotr, he was like, can I read the script? And I was like, of course. So I sent him over the script initially, and he liked it. I think he liked it. And so, we talked about it a bit. We, how this could be mutually beneficial for both of us. And then a few days later, I sent him the hard drive. I had 2 hard drives, and I was terrified because I was like, I don't know this person. I don't know what he's going to do with A, the footage, and B, this, $300 expensive hard drive that I spent my own money for, this whole thing. And so I was like, okay, my only solace was I had another hard drive with me. And if it all goes up in flames, at least I have this other hard drive, which proves, this is my footage. So I took a risk, and so did Piotr, obviously. And in the end, I think it paid off immensely for both of us.
That's great.
Yeah, talk about stereotypes, right? Polish guy, send him a hard drive. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But I love the script. I really liked it. And I have been offered editing on some short films in the past, but that's always my first question. Can you send me the script before we discuss anything? Back then, most of these scripts were just not good. I'm not a writer as you are, Pantelis, right? But I get a sense of a good story, and I wasn't getting the sense of good story from these scripts, but from yours I did. I really liked the script. I enjoyed it. I thought it's a very intriguing story. So as you said, we found mutual interest in the collaboration, and I think that with time we really connected, and it was for both of us a really good experience, even though it was 100% remote editing workflow, right? We haven't met in real life even up to till today, right?
Yeah. Before we get into the whole workflow stuff, can you just give us a little synopsis of what the film is about?
Yeah. So basically, it's the story that I read in the New Yorker 3 or 4 years before I wanted to shoot it, and I was in love with this story. It's about this little 10-year-old boy who confesses to his parents that he's no longer he doesn't love them, and he doesn't want them to touch him, and so it creates this dynamic for his parents that they weren't prepared for, and it slowly kind of unravels the quaint family dynamic that they were once used to, and it affects everyone's relationship and their entire lives. I love this story. I thought it was terrifying, darkly funny, and definitely up my alley, the kinds of things that I like to write myself. And so for whatever reason, it was COVID. It was the middle of COVID, right? And I had a summer off. I was just writing essentially, and I wanted to do this short film. I had this director of photography who's wonderful, and I I was like, we need to do something together. No one's working. No one's doing anything here in New York right now. There's this amazing stock of actors and actresses who they're literally doing nothing, and we should do something. So basically, I reached out to the writer. I was like, can I make your short story into a little film? And he said no. It was just very simple. One email, one word response, no. And so I sent him, well, like this is going to be really good, and we're going to try very hard, and it's going to be. We have this amazing photographer who's going to just shoot it beautifully. We should do it. So I got another response, and it was just no. So I was like, okay, I really need to convince him that we're going to do a good job on this. And so after that, I sent him this really long email, maybe like 1,000, 2,000 words, about like how we're like dedicated to making this something special. And he finally said yes. Got me in contact with his agent, and his agent was like, okay, you can have it for $1, but it can't be a feature. It has to be a short film, and there were some like limits to what we could do. And I was like, perfect, this is great. Yeah, and we were able to make it.
That's amazing.
Never take no for an answer. That's the takeaway.
That's the takeaway, especially like in this business.
So then obviously you shot it all and you guys got it together. You luckily found Peter in a single swoop, like won the golden ticket with Peter, which is an amazing story in itself. So then now you guys start editing, and you at that time are clearly not in Poland, and Peter is in Poland. So it's all remote. This is, a remote endeavor. How did the workflow work with that? How was that experience, and how did you guys collaborate? I mean, you're essentially reforming this relationship from the ground up.
Yeah, Piotr, do you want to answer this, or should I?
Yeah. I can start, and then you can add something on top if you want to. So basically, I think that Pantelis was relying on me a little bit here when it comes to workflow, at least. So I suggested that we do team projects in Premiere Pro, which is a workflow that is designed for remote scenarios, right? So the great thing that we came up with, and something that I would definitely do again, is that we basically had 2 sequences for each scene with all of the dailies inside. So I created I organized the project. I'm strong on organizing because it's very important for an editor, for the whole workflow, for everything that comes later. So each scene had 2 sequences for dailies. One of them was for me, and one was for Pantelis. And we both made our selects, so what we considered to be the best takes. But we haven't looked at what other person selected before we actually have done, our selects. And I think that's very crucial, because you don't want to be you don't want to contaminate your your sensitivity to the footage by looking at what someone else thinks, right? So then I started cutting, and once I was ready to show a first assembly of the film, basically we started these 2 hours long conversations via Zoom, where we just discussed what's there, what needs to be done for the next iteration, and the rest is history.
So how soon did you get your first cut done, your first assembly?
It took a while. We had so many limitations. It was a low budget short film. So I couldn't put my clients away, right? I still needed to prioritize my clients. Pantelis was okay with it. So it took a while to get the first assembly. I think it took a month to get the first assembly or something like that. And then it took another 2 months to log the picture, something like that. I think the whole process from me starting to cut it to organize the footage to the picture log, I think it was something like 3 months. I'm not really sure, to be honest, because it was a while ago. But something like that. Pantelis, is that what you recall as well?
I think the timeline is very skewed because he had a lot of projects and I had a lot of projects at the time.
Yeah.
And I think we would have been way more efficient if we were, if we had nothing else at the time. But because we had all these other projects going on, when we went back to editing, oftentimes we came to it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
So because there was all these gaps. So in some ways, it was very helpful because it was something that we overworked, let's say, before. All of a sudden we go back to it and we're like, wait, that thing that we spent so much time on, like it could be simpler. We could simplify this thing here, and it's just gonna work. And just for the record, when we were talking, just so Ricardo, when we were talking about selects, he had his selects and I had mine. I would say that 90% of our selects overlapped. Like we had maybe 3 to 8 takes per shot. It wasn't that much. It wasn't like Martin Scorsese, we're 30 takes in and we're literally like there's some nuance. It was not that. We were able to like narrow it down pretty fast in terms of what footage we were actually using to cut.
Okay. Peter, what made you decide to go that route, to both of you having your own select reels to then basically compile the best of together?
So the discussion we had together, we had the discussion, and Pantelis was just like, maybe it would be cool if I could select the takes that I want you to use. Although, as Pantelis said, like there was a great overlap in the selects we had, but still, it's an evolving process. So with next iterations, we sometimes decided that these shots or even these scenes are not needed in the final film. So yeah, it was the preference, and I think actually it's a very cool idea to do it this way, because this way you give ownership to the director as well, and also the freedom, I guess, for creative discussion, because both of you know what's there, right? So you don't have to rely just on someone saying that we don't have this take or something like that, because both of you know the footage. And of course, the director is on the set, but still, after a few months, it vanishes from his head to a great extent. So the ability to go through dailies once again and to have it centralized, for me that's important, as from the workflow point of view, to have it centralized. So I wouldn't like Pantelis to go through one file at a time on his QuickTime, right? And just type me an email, this file over here, let's use the moment from minute 20, blah, 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 something like that, right? Because that would be not clean or not efficient, would be distracting, would be, it wouldn't work. So having it centralized is just very important for me. And yeah, I intend to use this approach whenever a director wants to use it. Really, it's cool.
As we've talked about before, and as Pantelis, as you've learned, you're kind of rewriting the story in the edit at the end. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, as you're a writer, and assuming that since this is your directorial debut, and basically kind of rewriting the script in images rather than on the page, how was that experience for you? This is, assuming that this is a new thing for you, where you're actually sitting, watching a story kind of come to life that you've written and now that you've directed, and seeing Peter almost as Peter is your hands for writing and whatever.
I think in that sense, the time was the most important key ingredient to this whole thing, because when you're able to forget all that time you put into writing, and you're able to forget the trauma that is working on a set, because it's traumatic every time, then you can look at the material innocently in a way, and you're able to do things to it. You're able to kill your darlings, so to speak, of the bits that you loved in the writing and of the bits that you loved on set, and remold it into something that's completely different. And that was very helpful. So going back and having that time was crucial in that sense, for sure.
So what were the challenges for both of you guys in working with this remote workflow?
So I think one step that we didn't really talk about was, so we talked about how we had a cut, a final cut or a first cut, let's say, after 3 months. But what we did was we also went scene by scene. We edited scene by scene. So like,
Okay.
you know, in the workflow, basically Piotr would lead this. So he would be like, let's work on this scene right now. We'd work on the scenes that he wanted. And I was like, okay, whatever you want, let's focus on that scene. So we went scene by scene first. And we tried to like nail the dynamic of the scene. We had a few iterations of each scene before we had a first cut, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We had like a first cut of, say, one scene. He would send it over. I would look at it. We would fix that. We would go through that a few times. And then we had a first cut of the whole thing. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was this just basically Piotr sending him a file, or so are you working with him team projects here, or are you sending a QuickTime?
No, team projects. Everything was team projects.
So then are you watching it together?
Yeah. We've been watching it together over Zoom, which is not ideal, but
Okay.
actually works like good enough,
Yeah.
I think, for this size of production. You know, you can like enable both like the video optimization when you share the screen on Zoom, and that's something you have to do if you want to work this way. But if you enable this option on Zoom, it works quite smooth. So, but yeah, definitely it was one of the shortfalls to some extent. You know, having to struggle with like, you know, internet connections sometimes and things like that. Definitely some of the shortfalls, right? But at the same time, I think that overall the experience was quite smooth. Although, like, what both of us, I guess, would prefer would be to not work on many projects at once, right? And be able to like focus on this short film for like, you know, for like 3 weeks, 100% of my time, right? And then we could, for example, take 1 month break to get the fresh perspective, right? So that would be an ideal situation, and that's something that I know that if we do another project together, that's something that I would like strive for, right? To get more room to be able to focus on it solely. Yeah. Other than that, like it worked. It worked. I mean, you know, it wasn't only with Pantelis, right? We did like we did like, you know, sound design, right? Sound design. Amelia Palmer did it. I met with her via Zoom. We, you know, exchange everything that we needed to. Turns out she uses Soundly as well, so it was easy to exchange sound effects. I just created a collection there and just shared it with her. Yeah, the workflow was smooth.
Pantelis, how did you feel about it? You thought it was pretty smooth considering?
Yeah. So basically, I think one of the things that we figured out early on is that I would watch the work that he did or the cut that he did for a particular scene before the Zoom meeting. And then we were able, instead of watching the whole thing while we were on the Zoom meeting, we would able to just fast forward to the moment that I had a note about, for example, or he had a particular concern about. And so by being prepared and going into the meeting, having seen the material that he had just worked on, it really made it efficient, and it made the Zoom aspect and the connection with the Zoom much more manageable in that sense. Also, the sound, we got very lucky. I think Amelia is phenomenal. Like, like there's so many aspects of the editing process I had no idea about until Piotr came along. Like, I literally didn't know what was going on. I had read one book by Walter Murch. That's it, you know? And so basically, you know, Piotr was holding my hand throughout the whole process, and I learned how to do it because of him, essentially.
Oh, nice.
And so knowing when the coloring is going to come, knowing when the sound is going to come, like when we had to deal with those things, when it came down to it, like I went full force, and I had the people in line, and I knew who I was going to contact, and like and the music and the composition, all of that stuff, like I was able to manage the process and produce the thing. But Piotr, like, for sure, he was like, okay, we're going to do this first, and we're going to do it with, you know, he has such a mechanical or engineer mind that it really helped making this movie across 3 continents, essentially.
Yeah.
That's great. You had mentioned you would have these Zoom meetings to discuss notes or scenes and stuff. So can you guys talk a little bit more about like how it was dealing with the feedback and the notes? Was it always going to be a conversation, or was it sometimes like a laundry list of like, Pantelis, you were like, cut this out, add this, this needs to be different or whatever, or
I think we used both note taking and just conversations. And to me, like the most useful were obviously conversations we had.
We also used the pins, like you would have the timeline pins on like
Markers.
in the final draft. So we would use those often, both like back and forth and stuff. But I think the most crucial part of it is not the technical aspect, whether it was notes or conversation or the pins or whatever it is. I think it's both. For me, what makes me want to go back to Piotr in the future, like let's put it that way, is the fact that I would ask something and he would be like, okay, let's try it. So he would want to experiment with the idea that I had, and vice versa. He would ask something of me and I'd be like, okay, let's try it. And so we would try it. And then in the end, it was usually pretty clear what was better. And it really wasn't like, it was pretty black and white. Like, but the point is we had to go through those iterations and the creative, like the versions to get to the point where we're like, yeah, that's the best. I know some people are like, that's too much work, or it's beyond whatever it's beyond whatever we discussed at the beginning, let's say. That can't work. This is not a commercial, like this is not
right.
This is not a paid project in the industrial sense of the word. You know what I mean? This is like this is something that's supposed to last forever. You know what I mean? That's the goal.
Right.
That's how I go into every project. And so if we don't think about it that way, then I can't work with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I need to have that commitment because I had that from every aspect of the creative process, from the actors, from the director of photography, from the sound person, from the composition. And so that for me was the most important part of this whole process, was being able to mess around and experiment and see different options. Again, we didn't have much, which was like, we didn't have much of an opportunity to experiment because there wasn't much material there. It's a 15-minute short, you know what I mean? We had very limited takes from each scene. And so, but because of that, the willingness to be able to experiment within that framework and structure was even more crucial and even more important because you had such a limited palette, if you will,
Although still there are like 16 versions of this short film in our team project. So I mean, we still experimented quite a lot. Like for some of them, there were like the changes were minor, but still like we had like I think we started with the first version. Obviously, was like a script edit, so to speak, right? The next one was pretty similar, but on something like iteration number 4 or 5. We were already like getting rid of some of the scenes you shot, right? Or restructuring them, like putting them in different places. So overall, we did experiment even with those limited options that we had.
That's awesome. So now that the film is out, what do you think you guys would have done differently?
I think if we were in person, we would probably nail like the fraction of a second over here and the fraction of a second over there, being able to like shave a little bit better. It would probably be slightly better sculpted, but not much, because we did that. Like it took more time and it took a lot of back and forth, but we definitely did that. I think the biggest difference wouldn't be in the edit. I think the biggest difference would be in my shot list. I think it would be in the shot list more than anything. And we talked about a lot about this, me and Piotr, a lot. And I think one of the things would be, if I had known him as I do now, I would have probably brought him on before I even started my shot list, from the very beginning. There's two versions of that. Piotr talked about this. Like, there's an editor who doesn't want to know anything before he gets the footage, and then there's someone like who helps prepare the shot list to a certain extent to find or prepare. He can see the gaps where you need this transition here, or you need this transition shot, or this cutaway, or this medium shot, or this close up here. Otherwise, you're not going to get the emotion here. And I know, like, I like to prepare. That's just how my mind works. And so that's probably the biggest thing in terms of how how the editing would be different. They would just be brought on much earlier on in the process. How about you, Piotr?
I agree with everything Pantelis just said. The only thing that I would add probably is that some of the things that worked on paper turned out to be like too lengthy for a film medium. So we had some of the scenes that you see in the short film that are actually very long were like twice as long
Oh, really?
in dailies, So I think like even though it worked on paper, and that's like, and that's not something that I actually could see when I read the script, and at least not right away. So that's something that I would be probably more sensitive about these days.
Yeah,
right.
I agree
Great.
with that. Because we're coming from this literary object, which was the short story, and because I am more of a writer than anything else, we forget that the cinema is a visual medium, right? Or at least I did at times when I was working on this project, and knowing that I could convey just as much without the words is something that I would probably try and. It was my first time adapting a text. I had never done that before, and so I think it was a learning experience in many ways.
So would you do that again? Would you do another story like this and try to adapt it for the screen? Or do you think you would just write your own story next time?
Oh, definitely. I would definitely adapt again for sure. I think I would just do it better next time,
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah,
all the mistakes I made, but mistakes that were
yeah.
good, like things that it was very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Happy mistakes, I should say.
And overall, I think, I don't want like the listeners to get an impression that we don't like the final result, because we do.
Yeah, definitely.
We are proud of the work we did together. And like, even I think that the final success that we got with the short film actually speaks for itself as well. Like, it was supposed to be like in Pantelis's initial plans, it was supposed to be like a festival premiere for Call the Bird, but didn't work out as planned. But we ended up publishing and releasing the short film on Omeletto, which is like the biggest short film aggregator on YouTube. And if you actually, I was like looking at it like three days ago, I think. If you take a last 45 short films released on Omeletto, Call the Bird is number one view wise. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it really is. And I'm not claiming that it's the best out of those 45, but it does provoke conversations, and that's what we were after. That's what we aimed for, to start the conversation with people, to make them think a little bit about family dynamics and things like that. So I think that like we succeeded, and I'm proud of the work we did together. Really, I am.
Me too.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
great.
crazy to think right now that it has over 80,000 views and 900 comments. Like I never expected that to happen. Never once.
Yeah, and it's a little bit over a month, so it's still like a fresh baby on YouTube.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's the first I've heard of that, so that's awesome.
Thank you.
So I guess, Pantelis, what's next for you then? Or do you have any projects that are in the works?
Yeah, I'm writing at the moment. I'm writing my first Greek script. I've only written in English and French so far, and I'm here right now. I'm working on a feature, and other than that, I worked for the past 6 months on a film in the north of Greece. I was living in Thessaloniki for the past 6 months, and post is going to be in LA and in London. And there's a chance I'm going to be hopping on to help work posts for this film. And if I hadn't had this experience, I would be way more clueless as to what I was entering in terms of workflow. So I have Piotr to thank for that in many, many ways.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I hope you get to go there and do cool stuff.
Thank you. But honestly, like I do hope that in the next film that we work on, we'll have at least a weekend or at least a week together, like right next to each other,
Yeah.
working live, let's say, at the same time. But just to say, I was listening the other day to Roger Deakins' podcast, which is wonderful. It's called Team Deakins. It's a great podcast, and they had the editor of Dune on there for one of the episodes. And this guy, he edited the whole thing from his house, like the whole thing. He edited it from his house, and so it's like, this is the future. This is how things are going to be edited from now on. We're not going to be going or entering into these huge post-production houses the way that it's been going on. I mean, of course, that will always exist for the studio films and for big commercials. But when you're making small independent stuff, you just don't need it. And so as long as you have a computer with a decent speed and people that are creative and smart around you, you'll be able to find other ways to make do post for your film. And so I don't see myself like doing this process any other way. Even if I had $10,000 more, I would rather give it to my editor than to some post-production house paying $800 a day or whatever it is to rent out their facilities.
Exactly. And by the way, I have been thinking about it. I think like the way to go is like to as you said, like fly over for a week or something like that to log the picture. I think the initial steps and like rough cutting and things like that are not really needed to do like, in person. But I think for me at least, it would be especially helpful to get the final stages eye to eye, like to tweak them, like, working in person. And because that's when we had like a lot of conversations about like, the story structure, things like that. And these things are probably best discussed in person. So I would imagine like my perfect scenario would be where like, a strong assembly edit, like a strong rough cut like is ready to go remotely. And then we get together for the final week or something like that to polish the story, right? Yeah, that's for the future. We'll see.
I guess we can end it there. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us, Pantelis, and congratulations on Cold Little Bird.
By the way, Cold Little Bird is available on the Omeleto YouTube channel, so you can just, find Omeleto YouTube channel, or you can just type in Cold Little Bird in YouTube search, and you'll be able to find it out. So watch the short film. We would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, we'll also have a link in the description. And as always, if you want to reach out to us, we have an Instagram, Cut to Reveal, @Cut2Reveal. We also have the electronic email. We have an email address, and then there's also a SpeakPipe where you can leave us a message if you want. The link is always in the description. So thanks again, Pantelis and Peter, and I hope everybody who's listening to this and watching this has a great day, and take care.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy day.
If you like what you've heard, please rate, review, or subscribe on whatever platform you've listened to this on.
Your reviews help other editors to discover the show, and tell your friends.
Also, if you have any questions or comments, leave us a message at SpeakPipe. There's a link in the description, or email us at podcast@cuttothepoint.com.